Rosalyn Dance, and I'm that transitional person where I am still a member of the House of Delegates, and I'm on my way to the Senate. But I've had the wedding, and I have to wait for the preacher to sign the license, and that takes place on the 24th when the State Board of Elections certifies me, and then the clerk of the Senate, Susan Sharp, finishes that up. But the wedding has occurred, and there were a lot of guests, wonderful guests that enjoyed the experience. But I'm delighted to be here, and I know it's time of me, and I will say that we come with different perspectives when we are members of the General Assembly, and I come from the area of having worked my career in the area of healthcare, and then particularly working with those with intellectual disabilities on the facility side, but also sharing as an elected official, working with those in the community. So I've had a chance to work in both environments, and that's what I bring to the table, and as I listen to the issues and concerns that you all have. Thank you.
Senator Watkins.
My name is John. Okay. I don't know where it is. My name is John Watkins, and I'm a member of the Virginia Senate 10th Senatorial District. I represent all of Powhatan County, the northern half of Chesterfield County, and the west end of Richmond. About 85,000 people in the city of Richmond, about 100,000 in Chesterfield, and about 20 or 25,000 in Powhatan. I serve on the committees of finance. I chair commerce and labor. I'm also on conservation and natural resources, and I also am on transportation. In my role on finance, I am on the subcommittee that oversees healthcare and deals with the Department of Medical Assistance Services. So I have been a member of the Senate. It will be almost next year at the end of the session. It will be 18 years, and I was in the House of Delegates for 16 years prior to that. So I've been in it a long time. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Now, I'll start with the first question. Virginia has been working on a waiver redesign initiative for more than a year to improve the access to integrated services in the community in order to comply with Virginia's settlement agreement with the Department of Justice. Now, the waivers first came into Virginia in 1991, and I don't believe have been significantly changed since that time, since they were first initiated. Now, in order to comply with the Department of Justice's settlement agreement with Virginia, to comply with new centers for Medicaid and Medicare final rules, providing full access to benefits of community living and the opportunity to receive services in the most integrated setting appropriate. Will you support the Virginia Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Services recommendation for changes to Virginia's intellectual disability and developmental disability waiver program? And if not, why not?
Well, I answer to the people that put me there, and I'm glad John reminded me that I have to say now, instead of 80,000, I represent 200,000, 3 counties, 3 cities. I represent an area that we've had a training center to close, and we're the only one that's closed, Southside Training Center, and that was my home. I was administrative there during my up until I retired. But I would say that I take my marching orders from the people that put me there, and I listen to what you all have to say. So there's not a yes or no I will support. I've had the opportunity to serve on the commission that's looking at the fact that we closed one facility and how fast should we move to continue to follow the mandates that are set with the settlement that the administration agreed to. And that's what we've been doing. We found that there was no consensus on one. We have about 5 options that rose to the top, but none has been decided, and they're still a work in progress. And one of the things I wanted to know about it was, since Southside Training Center has closed, then that should be our point of reference. Let's look at that and see how successful that's been, how people have been integrated into the area to find out if this is the way we should go. but I would not say I would automatically go a yes or a no. I would like to have input from the people that are directly impacted by the decisions we make, and then, because I am the voice for those people, then vote accordingly.
Senator Watkins?
I'm not certain what the latest recommendations will look like. Usually, much of this is incorporated in presentations and reports that come out in dealing with the budget. The governor will not be making a presentation until sometime about the 17th of December, and at that time we will get an indication as to where his priorities are. And that will clearly focus in on exactly what they're going to try to comply with the Virginia Department of Health and Developmental Services. So I wish I could give you a better answer than that right now. I was on the Finance Committee when we dealt with the decision with regard to the federal government. The Justice Department does nothing with regard to funding of these services. Half of it, 50% of it, comes from the federal government out of CMS, and the other 50% has to come from Virginia. So each ID and DD waiver that is provided costs Virginians just as much as we get from the federal government. So that's part of the issue.
Thank you. The next question?
Hi, this is my son. This is my son Mark. He's 44 years old and has been on the waiver list for over 10 years. This year, only 25 ID and 15 DD waiver slots were funded by the General Assembly. This is an all-time low when the waiting list is an all-time high. A total of only 40 waivers is just devastating to over 9,200 individuals and families waiting to receive a waiver so they can be supported and live and participate in our community and have a life just like yours. We have families in our community in crisis with aging parents, individuals aging out of foster care with nowhere to go, and individuals with intensive medical and behavior support needs. It is so critical and urgent to these individuals and families to get the support they need. My question is, how will you show leadership in the General Assembly to acquire more funding for waiver slots?
Senator Watkins, if you'd like to start that,
Well,
and we'll answer these questions and then introduce McEachin.
Virginia has a requirement for a balanced budget. We do not have the ability to appropriate money that we do not have. We are facing at this time a huge reduction even now from where we were at the time the budget was originally put together. We're looking at another $400 to $500 million that's going to have to be cut out of the existing budget. Part of the problem, deals with what I just mentioned a little bit earlier, and that is the cost of each ID and DD waiver. 50% of it is borne by the taxpayers here in Virginia, and 50% of it is borne by the federal government, but also that's taxpayers here in Virginia. In the last 9 years, the percentage of the budget that has been shifted to the Department of Medical Assistance Services has gone up dramatically. And right now, in 2014, it represents about 20% of the budget. It used to be that education was the area of the budget that grew the fastest. That's not so now. The Department of Medical Assistance Services vastly outstrips the growth of education. So we're jeopardizing K-12 education right now. And I don't know that we're going to be able to bring on additional waivers at this time.
Senator-elect Daniels.
Thank you. When I look at the Medicaid waivers, and of course, I said my love is for the folks that are my family, that facility is closed, but Medicaid waivers is one of the things that we address, because right now, my house side with appropriations, healthcare and education, you know, those are like top priorities, core value priorities for all of us, no matter what we set, what side of the aisle we set on. But we understood the need for Medicaid waivers, and we listened to you all, because you all come in large numbers every time we have budget hearings. You all are there to make sure we feel it, and we do feel it. Sometimes we have to turn our chair high a little bit, and I let you see because we understand. So I will say we feel it, and it is the money thing. And again, that's what the commission is looking at. When we look at the training centers, we realize there's about $100 million that's being used into facilities. You got 9,000 on the outside, you got 500 on the inside. But I've been on the inside, so I know how those folks feel too. So I'm that marginal person, right? Just like my badges today. I'm a marginal person. I understand both sides. But if we can get that part right, as far as closing of the facilities in the right manner, that they get a transition, because you can't just say throw them out with the wash or whatever, because you cannot do that. You have to transition. And we're trying to find a better way to transition, to reduce the facilities. Mine is gone, and that's going to be an example for the other 4 that are on the table. But as we look at reducing that, then we'll have more money, because again, the state has to, you can only do what you have money for. That'll allow us more money to work with the waivers. And I think that's something that we're always going to be looking at, the recommendations and how we might be able to do that. Reduce one side and then have monies left to deal with the other 9,000 that's out there, because everybody's in the mix. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator McEachin, would you like to both
Sure.
Introduce yourself and then if you care to answer that question as well, that'd be wonderful.
Sure, I'll take a stab at that. First of all, let me apologize for being late. I have the blessing of being an only child and also the responsibility. And unfortunately, my mother's ill, and we had some hiccups this morning, so I had to deal with those. But I'm happy to be with you. My name is McEachin. I represent the 9th Senate District, which is part of Hanover, part of Richmond, part of Henrico, and all of Charles City County. And I've been now completing my 2nd term in the Virginia Senate. I agree with everything John said. I agree with everything that Rosalyn said. So let me try to say something different. And that is, and it's a little off topic, but I think you'll understand it when I finish up. Governing is about priorities. And you all are our bosses. But a funny thing happened on the way to being here today, and that was an election a few years ago when we elected Jim Gilmore governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia. Jim's a fine man, but he sold you on a bill of goods called no car tax. Now, when you go home and look at your car tax relief and look at how much money you got for it, you'll probably figure out that you, like me, can go to Ponderosa maybe an extra time a month with the amount of your car tax relief. We have nearly $1 billion tied up in our state government appropriations act for car tax relief. $1 billion. And I'm not here to tell you that it could all go to Medicaid waivers, because there are a lot of demands that would be placed on $1 billion if it were freed up. But what I am telling you is that we're going to start to need some help from you all. We're going to need to have some more activism for you all, not just in terms of telling us what you need, but also telling us how to get it. I have been saying this for any number of years, and I'm sure at this point I feel like Wile E. Coyote. I keep running into a wall and leaving an imprint, but I never seem to knock down the wall. But it's your money. You get to decide how it's used. You get to place demands on us. I think that the car tax relief that's being afforded to you is not being well spent. And if I had a magic wand and could wave it, I would release those dollars so that they could go to other places and fulfill other demands and needs. But you're gonna need to speak out on that. It doesn't have to be my idea, maybe you have another idea. But again, all of us up here wanna see more waivers for the people of Virginia and the people who need it. The question is where do we get the money to do it? Thank you.
Thank you. Next question?
Okay. It's great. Okay.
Everyone wants to hear you.
Okay. First of all, I want to say thank you for giving us your Saturday, because Saturdays are precious. I'm an educator of 40 years. I understand how precious your Saturdays are. I am also a substitute speaker. My dear friend who was going to ask this question did not feel well, and I'm stepping up to the plate for her. So this is not necessarily my situation, but I feel like the Lorax, I speak for the trees. So it's Mary Beth's question, and it is deeply concerning to hear that some legislators in Richmond are trying to keep training centers open in Virginia. I can't help but wonder why so much money is being invested into training centers that are only able to serve a limited number of people. The people in the training centers are no different than those of us who live in the community. For every person in a training center, there is someone who has equivalent, if not greater, support needs in the community. Yet the cost of these facilities is 2 to 3 times the cost of community-based care. In addition, the Department of Justice Virginia's settlement agreement requires that all people with ID and DD have access to community-based services that meet the need of the individual. Our 34-year-old daughter has been on the wait list for 12 years. There are 8,500 people in there and their families waiting, while over $100 million goes into Central Virginia and Southwestern Virginia Training Center each year, serving less than 450 people. The question is, will you support moving away from these institutions and allocate funding and resources toward building a more robust community-based service system?
This time we'll start with Senator McEachin.
I'm going to give a very general answer, and that is yes, I'm supportive of that. But let me confess to you all right now that I'm here to learn. We are all part-time legislators, and I had a brief stint on the Finance Committee. Very brief, like a couple of weeks. Not enough time to learn anything. But Rosalyn and John know this issue much more in depth than I do, but I hear folks coming to me every day or every session talking about this, and you've persuaded me that this is the route to go. And so, yes, it's my answer.
Senator Watkins.
It is my hope, and I have urged other members of the Senate Finance Committee and the subcommittee that we do need to conform and comply with that consent decree. But please keep in mind that that consent order did not say that all of them would be closed. It said that we would reduce significantly the number of facilities, and personally I think all of them need to be reduced in size, and we probably do need to close at least 3 of them, maybe 4. But there are some folks in some of those facilities that we do not have the capacity in the community settings to take care of them right now. And we're not about to put people like that on the street. I'm sorry, we're just not going to do it. We need to push as hard as we can to get as many people out of those facilities as we can. And we need to push to build up the community support groups and facilities. There's a lot that needs to go on there. Local governments don't understand what that requires with regard to zoning and land use and the implications that come along there. And that somebody's, has got to relate that to them. So, I would issue the challenge that part of it is for you to work with local governments and make sure that they do their part so that we can conform, so that we can comply with the consent order. But that's the only way we'll be able to get there.
Hi.
Hi.
I said I was a marginal person. When I was in the facilities, it was like, no way will my folks go. And I knew there was always, I've been there, I retired 34 years. There was always that commitment to make sure our clients resided in the least restrictive environment. And the greater community we saw was at the desired state we want to get them in. But on the community side, you've never had your loved one in the facilities. You've been trying, you've been working real hard to keep them out. And I know as a director, we didn't get any young people anymore, and it was just those who were medically fragile or that they were very challenging behaviors that just could not be taken care of in the least restrictive environment. This was a least restrictive environment. So there's always been the goal, even before we were mandated, to reduce the size of the facilities, but have that nugget where it is someone that needed to go and needed special services to go, even if it was transitional for a short period of time or whatever, but that place would be there for them. One of the recommendations that is being considered is the one that I introduced, and the two senators, they are real senators, Barker and Norman, seem to be in agreement with, I'm watching my time's running out, can't talk about that. But anyway, we're looking at just that. How do we take care of those folks that are concerned about, now you're going to throw my child out and I'm not prepared and I've never been doing this and everybody's taking care of them and you want to just put them out there and I'm getting old too. So with that in mind, it's like, how do we transition? And that's why we have a proposal. One of the proposals says, let's look geographically, look at the largest concentration. Can we use these facilities and not have them as a state facility as it is known, but a more of a community, it sits in the community, not the stigma of saying it's a facility, it's community, but it takes those intellectually fragile, those medically, those challenged, put them all together where there's a service for both sides. That this is a meeting point, and then we transition until there is no longer a need for state facilities. But this is something for everybody, because even those who come out and those 9,000, you'd love to have something like this as an change. And so that's one of the things that we're looking at. We couldn't get consensus. You all should look at that. Maybe that's one that you might want us to work on. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Hi, thank you. I am very appreciative of the fiscal constraints that you are dealing with and your bent towards fiscal responsibility. My concern is that there's a push towards managed care. And while it sounds good on the surface, they're going to manage things and hopefully they're going to care. My experience as a physician has not been so great about that. They tend to mismanage and they tend not to care. But the real concern is that the organizations that are being considered for managed care have no real experience in providing long-term care for those with disabilities. Most of their cost savings, which is their forte, has been in trying to curtail the use of episodic care and emergency room care and that kind of thing. The care that our people with disabilities need is really life enabling. It lets them participate in a significant way. And it's a really short-term benefits. Maybe we'll cut some costs here, but in the long run, you're probably going to disable them further and make them not part of the community, not gainfully employed, not able to live independently. It's really going to cost everyone in Virginia more in the long sense. Do you have how do you feel about managed care in the management that's being considered?
I think my answer would be to you, and you all seem to be the experts that have, in an ideal world, we talk about a life like yours and all those terminologies, but if you're in the community and you're living it because you have loved ones or you are actually treating loved ones, then it seems that you should be telling us what is the desired state, what is the desired service that should be provided. For me, as a facility director, we had to meet stringent service mandates by Medicaid for certification of our clients. It was the highest quality, and that's what the folks inside are fighting for. Is we like that. We don't know what we're going to get when we get outside. Is there going to be the oversight? Is it going to be the requirement that you have all these services if they're needed? Not just give you something, but if it's geared, individualized to my loved one, will they get all of this? And who's going to oversee to make sure they keep them safe? So those are the things that I think in any system that we have should be there. And you all should be reviewing, and I know you are, and telling us what's good about it, what's bad about it. And then if we fail to listen, because as Donald said, you're our boss, we know what the consequences are for us. And we like our jobs. We like our jobs.
This is a tough issue. I will be quite blatant and say to you that managed care is coming to all of the systems because it drives the cost down. Fee for service, if you stack up fee for service against managed care, case for case, client for client, what you find is that there's a huge savings in a managed care system. Yeah, I'm not particularly in love with it. I'm not particularly in love with how we're going to phase into it. But I would say to you that before, and I've been around long enough to remember when the first time that we went to a managed care system, and the federal government required that we pick up children of single parents in Medicaid, and that we take them up to 200% of poverty. And we passed the legislation, and at that time, then Governor Jim Gilmore vetoed it because of the cost associated with it. And then we came back and put together a managed care system to pick up incrementally that cohort, if you would, of young people. And it has worked very well. Now, it doesn't work overnight. There's no question about the fact that if you live east of Richmond in Northern Virginia and Hampton Roads, there are probably about 8 or 10 companies that are in the business of managed care insurance. If you live west of Richmond in that line, this is going to take a little longer, I'm sorry. If you live west of that line, there are fewer companies that actually offer managed care programs. So it took us a phase in of about 4 to 6 years before we really got enough of a balance to completely cover the state. And what we did is we left fee-for-service in place until the managed care companies were there that could adequately cover and run the systems on the western part of the state. You're going to see it not only with ID and DD waivers, you're going to see it with long-term care for the elderly as well. It's a fact of life, I'm sorry.
I would have to agree with what John said. Given what I've seen in the assembly and our drive to save costs, managed care is really here to stay. What I would invite you all to do is to help us figure out ways to tweak it, perhaps incentivize them to be more caring than managing perhaps. But I can't sit here and tell you realistically and be honest with you that somehow we're going to be able to roll back the managed care monster. It's here, and we have to figure out how to deal with it.
I appreciate that. A corollary, though, is that, managed care does work in its main goal, which is to save money. And it does so like this. You have this amount of money providing these services to these individuals. You put a layer of bureaucracy here to do that, and it has to support the cost of that administration and its employees and whatever, and maybe profit if it's going to be a profit-oriented managed care thing. So you take a lot away. So now you have less money, and then you still have to provide some services and pay the provider something. And now, in order to save money for that, you're actually going to have to provide fewer services and pay the providers less. It's really the only options that managed care has to save money. And it does. It does save money. It provides less care.
I know I'm not sure, but I also want to put this caveat out there. Managed care, as you say, if it is designed as we do individualized, the individual care plans for education and everything else, if it is individualized for the person, not just you get a block of money, because that's the problem sometimes with some of the systems we have in place, but it is geared to meet the needs of that individual. If I need a Toyota, don't give me a Rolls Royce. If I need a Rolls Royce, give me one. But everybody shouldn't get Rolls Royce. And I think it's then, again, as they say, tweak it to make sure that it meets the needs of that individual client versus we all get a block of money.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Sean Campbell, and this is my son, Alex Campbell, who's 9 years old. Before we begin, I just want to thank you for taking time away from your families to be here today and listen to our concerns with our families. Alex would like to share one of his experiences with you all.
2 years ago, my principal put me in the crisis room. He never said why I went into the room. Sometimes I felt like I went into the room for not doing anything at all. All he ever said to me was, quote, "You're going into the crisis room." He also said, quote, "Not going to tell your parents any of this, and I don't want you to either." Not only would he leave me in the room, he would also pull a spare desk and put it in front of the door. I could see him sitting in the desk from inside the door window, and know I was in there alone. Anywhere from 30 minutes to almost 2 hours. I never wanted to go back to school. I never told my parents about going into the room because the principal said he would put me into the room for the whole next day. I finally told my parents. I begged them not to go back to school. I did not want other kids to experience the teachers, behavior specialists, and principals that I have experienced.
Currently, Virginia has no laws to regulate restraint and seclusion within public school systems. I'm a public educator. I've been there for 14 years now. What we've learned is through the Commission on Youth and the restraint and seclusion study is that as we talk about the use of restraint and seclusion, that Alex's case is not alone. More and more families have unfortunately had the same or similar experiences as Alex and our family has had. My question, I guess, to you is, do you agree that Virginia needs to adopt laws that regulate this practice and emphasize non-interventionist methods such as positive behavior supports to mitigate the use of using crisis rooms or screen rooms? Or in Alex's case, it was a storage closet. And to also limit the use of restraint practices.
Senator McEachin.
I think, Alex's story is obviously a very compelling one. What I would have to know, to be quite honest with you, is how did we get here to begin with? In other words, what is the theory in public education that created this sort of restraint protocol? And then we'd have to look at it and see how to fix that. I don't want to sit here and tell you right now that I would absolutely vote to say you cannot do it under any circumstances. But I do think it's something that's certainly worthy of looking into and figuring out how we got there, because for what Alex said, I don't understand, and maybe the person's no longer in the school system, but for what Alex has just said, I'm not quite sure why any school system would retain someone who would do that to a child.
Well, according to the deposition by the principal, Alex was placed into the seclusion room for tearing paper, standing on a chair, banging on a door. It wasn't until about the 4th or 5th time when the principal was literally dragging him that he began being combative. And as for the principal, he is now working as a principal with at-risk youth at Richmond.
Well, that's comforting. But I guess what I would say is that, again, I'm not an educator, but I am a lawyer. And I don't understand how a principal can be allowed to say, don't tell your parents something. I can understand a certain amount of discipline for acting up in the classroom, but to me, it went a step too far in terms of, and don't tell anybody anything. That's a horrible thing to do. In fact, he should have been on the phone calling, he's saying, hey, your boy's acting up, if that was in fact the case. So sometimes it's hard to legislate for stupid, but we'll give it a shot. Thank you.
Well, all I can say to you is that, again, I have to give my point of reference to a training center where you're required to have positive behavior supports. We had schools, and everybody had to abide by that because, again, we had the Medicaid overarching. We would drop in and look at what we were doing, and we were in trouble. We would lose money, okay, for those clients. So it seems that there is two sets. You got the education, but they have special needs folks, and their needs are not being met. So they would behoove them to be a little bit more involved with the behavioral side of it, the services that we provide on that area, because there are positive behavior supports that can prevent situations like that from happening. But you're in education, you can't separate anymore, because now we're talking about closing facilities. Everybody's there together. So it's, what is a common ground? How do we address everybody's needs? And behavioral supports are going to be very, very important as we go forward.
Senator Watkins.
I think it's probably worth looking into. I'm reticent to mandate to local school systems exactly how they're going to have to handle that. We take a lot of pride in the fact that our local school boards have autonomy and deal with policies within that system to make the system work. And every time you turn around and start mandating them, they turn back to you and say, okay, are you going to help pay for it? And it becomes very difficult to know how to pay for something that should not be occurring within a school system like that. It's a tragic case that we have here in front of us, but it's anecdotal, and it's, in general, it's not a huge problem across the state. I know that there are cases, and they need to be looked at individually, but by and large, we've got, literally probably 1 million kids in school systems across the state when you think about it. And it's difficult to write legislation and mandating laws that can cover every circumstance that they get faced with.
Am I allowed to add something? If John's finished? Again, one of the things that I want to challenge you all to think about is the mosaic of the law, right? Because right now we're drilling in on a certain piece of it, and I don't think you're necessarily focusing on the rest of it. And so, let me throw out my bias first of all. Obviously, hopefully you all see enough TV to know that I'm a personal injury attorney, right? So, obviously I have a particular view of the world, right? But be that as it may, one of the things that we've done, and everybody loves to jump up and down and say, tort reform, there are too many lawsuits. But one of the things that we've done in Virginia is that we've immunized certain groups of people. And one of those groups of people are educational professionals. We have made it exceedingly difficult, and it's not my business to know how that deposition came about. Obviously, there's some legal action that took place, but we've made it exceedingly difficult for you as individuals to try to protect your children through the court system. So John is absolutely right. It's hard to write a law that's one size fits all. I have no argument with what he said. But that's why we have the court system, to give individualized justice. And so, you all might want to pay a little bit more attention and speak out a little bit louder the next time you hear somebody start to talk about tort reform. Because the very things that John is talking about are true, but the very things that Mr. Campbell is talking about are also true. And again, I don't know the procedural posture of his case, and I'm not trying to figure it out either. But I can tell you that no matter what's going on in his litigation world, it is more difficult than it should be, because we just leap out there and we just start immunizing everybody under the guise of tort reform. Hurrah, hurrah. It's great until you're the person upon whom the tort falls on, and then it's a different story. So that's my soapbox. I'm off.
Thank you. And just as an informal show of hands, has anyone in here been in a similar situation or had themselves or their child injured at school or restrained at school? Yeah. And I have. Mary Grace has had her arm broken by a teacher, and you can see that she's a violent child. Thank you.
Can I ask a question? I don't
Yeah, and
have a list.
Yeah.
I'm an ICU nurse, and so I see both sides, and I feel bad for the people, because obviously I see the ones that come into my ICU that are in training centers and that. So I have two thoughts and two questions, and the other was, do we get more in our area for being rewarded if it's a money type of thing for being in the district that closed theirs? Why is the money not floating back to more waivers in the area that we're in where we did comply, is one thought, if it's a money type thing. So I'm interested in trying to see how I can help with this as an advocate, to be on your side to help know who to talk to and help with this. But the other thought I had is that as a parent of a 17-year-old who's nonverbal and cognitively disabled, and God knows I'm so sorry for Mr. Campbell, but I will never know what they've done to my child. And when I go to the school, I have to wait to be announced, so I can't even surprised to find out what they've done to my child. And one time that I happened to get escorted, I saw them in the room alone with my child when the rest of the group was outside at the picnic. So I'm not even allowed to surprise visit to check in. So I wouldn't know. So that's just a curiosity. So thank you, sorry. And I thank you for being here too.
John?
First, my name is Sean, and I would like to thank all of you for taking your Saturday out to be here. The next question I'm going to ask, it kind of hits home to me because I have a couple of friends, one who lives in Tidewater who just recently had to reapply for a Medicaid-based community waiver, and I've known her for a couple of years, and just sad to see, people who really, truly need it not be able to get it. And state officials have said that the average cost of the waivers in recent years are decreasing due to people continuing to live with their families. Yet people with ID and DD never see these cost savings, and they are not used to help the next people in line on the wait list. Policy experts have suggested that the ID/DD waiver budget be moved to DBHDS and become part of an overall budget to serve people with ID/DD most effectively. Will you support this when you go back to Richmond in January?
Mr. Watkins?
The agencies are under the auspices of the executive branch of government. So I would say to you that first and foremost, it would take a direction at the governor's level to make that change. I don't know exactly what the implications are, other than the fact that there are people who can produce savings within these ID and DD waivers, and my history with it, or what I've learned from how they handle those, is they are put back in the system, and they are issued as additional waivers if they have them. But here recently, the fiscal impact of the budget has played too much of a role on our ability to have anything, and all savings are taken to try to make sure that we can live up to what we've already authorized. So it would have to be weighed if if the governor imposes or decides to bring about that change.
I've heard your question. I would say to you that you all would have to come and educate me more about what these policy experts have said before I can make a commitment about that. I just don't know enough.
I am going to be the freshman in the Senate. I will listen. If this is a recommendation that you all are supportive of, and the governor is supportive of, and like said, gentleman right there, he's bigger than me, but that's just, I'm saying in authority-wise. He's going to be my chair of the caucus that I'm in. So I'm going to do my best to make sure I educate him as much as y'all allow to give me. I'm going to be a sponge and pass it on to him to make sure that he can make the wise decisions, because I'm going to be following his lead, on what I can and cannot do for this first year as a freshman, because I have to learn and grow. I've been there 10 years as a member of the House, and in that I was very comfortable with what I would say to you today. But as a marginal person, still with one foot in the House, one foot in the Senate, the next week I'll be I'll be
Fully
all there.
understand.
I'll be all
We
there.
got-
I'll be all in. So I hear, I know, I feel for what you're going through. And if that's the best way, because I've been on appropriations, so I can give you my 10 years of that of knowledge. I can share with him what we've done on the other side of the house. But I'm in the Senate now, and I'm a freshman, and I want to be supportive of what you're saying and make sure that I'm in step with the direction that my leader is taking me in. He's done all right so far.
Hello, my name is Frank Tinsley. I'm a father of a child with autism. He's not really a child, he's a young adult right now. We're ready to transition him into the work field, me and his mother. And I just want to know, people with the developmental, people with DD want to work. Furthermore, many other individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities have skills and abilities that can contribute to our communities and economies, and they really do want to work. My question is, how will you show leadership to move Virginia forward to create more opportunities for people with developmental disabilities to work and earn competitive wages?
Oh, unlucky. I will tell you again that was one of the things that my point of reference is always to the facility, that clients, no matter what it is, if we could find something they could do to be productive, we would have them do this. Now, we could say that we could get the governor to say that every state agency, because he has some control there, would do their best to make sure that they had opportunities for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities where they could find work for them, real work for them, that they would hire those people. Now, for the private sector, we can only try to influence them by encouraging them, as I'm sure you're doing, that this would be a good thing. There might be some incentives we can come up with, but I'm not aware of those, and maybe these two senior folks can tell us how we can do that. But I'm always supportive of ensuring that there are opportunities to allow everyone to have a job, because that increases your feeling of self-esteem, of work, of self-worth.
I would just say, to add on to what Rosalyn said, is we do that to a degree now in terms of in terms of helping folks who are in that cohort to get gainful employment. But what I would ask you to do, invite you to do, is to come up with some more ideas. You can't find a bill dealing with folks in the autism spectrum that I haven't supported. But none of them have been my ideas, even though I've been the chief patron of some of them. All of those ideas have come organically out of the advocates for that community. So if there are ideas that we're not entertaining, please educate us to them, and I think you'll find a receptive audience, at least an audience that's willing to try.
Typically, it's large corporations that have programs specifically set aside or set up where they can offer employment to folks with some waivers. It's very difficult to push that down into some of the smaller companies. But I think that there, as time has progressed, there's more of an awareness, if you would, that many of these folks are fully capable of operating in a small business setting, and they just really need an opportunity. And I'm puzzled at exactly how we go about that, other than challenging you and your organizations to make it a part of your program, to bring some of the small business people in, bring chambers of commerce in, and get them involved in programs like that. I think that's the best way to get small business into it.
We have a few more minutes for questions from the floor. Are there any questions?
Yes, I'm speaking for myself right now. My son has been blessed with a job at a company called Health Diagnostic Laboratory. And I don't know if you're familiar with it or not, but you should become familiar with it. They have a representative here at this conference that maybe you can talk with. But they have employing maybe about 700 people, okay? They have a program in place with job coaches for people with intellectual disabilities. The job coaches are hired by Health Diagnostic Laboratory, and it's working phenomenally. They even have an internship program to help train people to go to other businesses, because they certainly can't hire everybody. But perhaps you can use their business model and promote it somehow with your connections. And, I don't know. I know there's not a lot of money out there, but perhaps there could be some small financial incentive to a smaller business for even trying something like this. Now, I'm speaking from my, unprofessional viewpoint. I'm a mom, but moms and dads really could teach you a lot, okay? and please, before you leave today, go talk to the lady from HTL, because she will give you some ideas, perhaps, that you can pass on to others. And even just passing the idea on, not legislating it or, just passing it on would be the beginning of something really wonderful for many people in this room who have no job and no hope for a job. Thank you.
I'm the mother of a 15-year-old very disabled child that has been in Henrico County 9 schools, 13 years. She's nonverbal. She's learned to walk, but school systems in Henrico have, for 3 doctor's letters, have proceeded to not let her walk at school. She's been denied the bus for 3 years. She was left unattended in the front of Freeman High School last year, and they wouldn't even give me the aide's name. There have been other problems where there was not good treatment of children in the classroom, and the parents are frustrated. There's possibly a class action suit in the works, and they deserve it. They won't. I have a letter denying my child access to the handicapped basketball league from the principal. It's signed. It's wrong. And Obamacare came, and that's another subject. However, I paid 22 years of a insurance policy that had comprehensive care for my child. We paid $1.5 million out of our pocket. We moved in with my in-laws to look after them and my child. And we have a new policy. I can't go to St. Mary's anymore because I will get a 0 coverage. But if I go to MCV, I get to pay half of it. My child has traumatic brain injury, seizure, stroke, coma, considered legally blind, has a feeding tube for 2 years, cerebral palsy, and a shunt. She has other issues. Everybody in here has issues. But I didn't come to do the Medicaid because I was told it was a bad joke. I could sign up for the list, but I wasn't going to get there. I didn't apply for SSI. I didn't want anybody in my home. I've even met with the director of the EDC way because it was easier to go to the 600 East Broad Street. And I remember that address 10 years later. And I've thought about applying. But the legislature is not giving the money to these kids. And these kids and these adults, they need that money. And the school system should be accountable. I've got a member of the family on your group. But they laughed at me when I went to the person who was in the board of education for our particular district. Well, yeah, we can help you. No, they can't. They didn't, we're on the board, we can't do anything. You're on the board for the Senate, and there's a lot of finances. But we want to thank you for being here. But there's a lot of trouble. You saw a lot of hands of a lot of kids that got hurt. And the school system is not accountable. And there's a lot of private stories, but you need to be aware that they exist. And they are probably, the majority of the people that are here have issues that they don't call you up and ask you or tell you about it, but they exist in this state of Virginia. And Virginia is ranked on the very lowest as providing for the educational needs and the medical needs for the community of disabled people. and we need to do better in Virginia. So thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
What I'd like to do, if you'd just like to say a few minutes, each of you, to wrap up. If there's anything else you want to add, that's great. If not,
I just say thanks for having me here. We hope that you will continue the dialogue, that you will reach out to us. I just found out from John that if you go on got those iPhones and you go to the App Store, you can get the Verizon directory for Virginia leaders in government, and you can get all of our numbers, emails as well. And so we work for you, and I like that term, boss, because I feel like I've got 200,000 bosses almost in another week. Right now I've got 80,000. But I have to answer to them, and I try to respond. So it's a lot, it's all of you, and it's just one of us in various capacities. So the more you tell us, the better job we can do on your behalf, because we are your voice. So use us, and thank you for having me.
I want to echo some of what Rosalyn said in terms of thanking you all for coming out. I'm certain that you've learned very little from me today, but I've learned a whole lot from you all. And I would just ask that you all remember this as you try to contact us. I have not had the privilege of being on an education committee where these issues come up on a regular basis, or on a health committee where these issues will come up on a regular basis. So I continue to invite you, and some of your advocates have taken me up on this, to come into my office, and I'm up on the 4th floor, and to educate me as to the various issues of the day as they affect you. I am the Senate Democratic Caucus Chair, which means I'm in charge of herding cats. But as I herd those cats, I am able to try to talk to my membership about the issues that you bring up, and we actually do talk about them in caucus, and we have, during the course of the session, we have Monday evening dinners together so we can talk about various issues. I can tell you that we're awfully sensitive to the needs of your community, but some of us need to learn more, and I put myself in that category as one of those who need to learn more. So I invite you to come visit with us, and I thank you for the invitation today.
I as well want to thank you for being here, because I think that our exposure to the needs of your folks, your friends, your children is extremely important. And the only way we can deal with it is to know what the issues are and know what your priorities are. It's not to say we can always give you exactly what you want when you want it, but unless we get reminded, or unless it becomes a priority in your world, I don't know how we expect it to become a priority in our world. There are just too many things, too many issues, too many people pulling on us all the time. So I thank you for being here. I thank you for giving me the opportunity to come and listen. I don't know all the answers by any stretch of the imagination, and wouldn't pretend to. But you put forward a compelling argument, and you put forward compelling issues that we probably need to deal with better than we have.
I want to thank each of our legislators for coming out here today. And a couple of things that I'm taking away from this, and that I hope each of us are taking away today, is that our legislators want input from us on waiver redesign, both the services that the waiver redesign, the waivers now and our redesign have, as well as the economics of it. So we need to come to the table with helping them understand how to pay for that. And so we realize that, okay? We have 9,200 fellow citizens on the waiver waiting list. We have a DMAS budget now that's 20% of our Commonwealth's budget. And that oftentimes this is in competition with a lot of other areas of our Commonwealth, including education. And we all know we fight every day on education fronts, as we heard today. We need to show that life in the community is better and more equitable way for our families and fellow citizens to live. That governing is about priorities, that we need to not only tell our legislators what we need, but also how to pay for it. So that's a theme we're hearing here. A reminder that the consent decree does not equal institutional closure. That's a continual education that we have to, as citizens, to help our legislators understand that living in the community, that fellow citizens living side by side in an open and free community is the best way to live. That working with our local governments is critical. I think each of us knows that not only at the state level, but at our local level, we have to be involved. And we have to meet with our boards of education. We have to meet with our boards of supervisors, our city councils, our town councils, and let them know that when they're planning for fire and emergency and schools, that they also need to be planning for in growth and development for our fellow citizens in the services and education that they provide. That least restrictive is the goal, that we need to help educate our leaders what we believe least restrictive means. That we need to tell our legislators the desired state and what's good and bad about managed care. And for ID and DD waivers, as well as for long-term care for elderly, that's a significant cost that we as citizens are bearing. And so we need to help figure out ways to provide those services better and to pay for those. So that means that well-informed case management will be ever more critical for our fellow citizens. So that's an area that we need to work on. It's hard to legislate for stupid, we realize that, but we have to find ways to protect our children. We need to push for transparency on waiver funding versus expenditures, and that may be an area for all of us to work on how we balance that and show that need, that what's going into the budgets on waivers that are being funded and what's coming out on the other end, and where's the difference going. That the opportunities for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities to be productive, wage-earning, and tax-paying citizens is critical. And that we need to develop more opportunities, all of us need to develop more opportunities and ideas on ways to integrate into the workforce. Not a one-size-fits-all. We all know that not one size fits all. And we need to highlight successes, such as HDL, who's here, and others. That's our job. That's the legislator's job, and that's our job to educate our private industry, our private citizens, on ways that we can, our fellow citizens can be productive, wage-earning, and tax-paying citizens. Right? And one of the ways that we can do that is for all of us to attend the Developmental Disability Advocacy Day at the General Assembly on January 26th. That's just around, 2 months away. Please take advantage. All three here, and every time that any of us have met with legislators, one thing they've said is, we want to hear from you. We want to hear from you. So we need to make sure that they hear from us, whether it's during the legislative season, or probably they would just as well or prefer outside of the legislative season because it's so busy down there. But we have to make sure that our voices are heard. I want to thank all of you for being here today. Thank you again. And we're going to end right now because we have other sessions. But if you're able to stay for just a few more minutes, if anyone has questions, please do come up and share those. Thank you very much.